essay, abstract essay where ideas take shape, thoughts find depth, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. She is a passionate advocating for transformational wellness, no other than Dr. Marissa Heisel.
Thank you
Welcome.
so much.
Yes, welcome, Dr. Marissa. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Of course, of course. So I was trained in as a chiropractor. I was a holistic chiropractor for over 20 years, and I trained in midwifery and child development as well. So much of my practice was really centered around women's health, right from um, the teenage years right through to midlife. That was really what I loved focusing on. And after, more than 2 decades of practice, I really started to develop this certain way of viewing health and the world and the responsibility that we really need to take for our own well-being, but also for our lives in general.
Dr. Marissa Hazel, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about a journey of self healing. What does self healing mean to you on a personal level?
So to me, self-healing is being courageous enough to do a lot of deep inner work, to look at our life story, to look at any traumas, physical, emotional, spiritual, that might be keeping us stuck in a period of time or in a mindset that is not most conducive to our greatest well being. And doing a deep dive into who we are, where we came from, what our belief systems are, and taking responsibility for ourselves instead of outsourcing it to so called experts really allows us to step into our own lives in a very powerful way. I truly believe that we've been indoctrinated by cultural scripts that are meant to keep us powerless. And the truth is that our bodies and our intuition and our minds know what we need. The work for me at this point in health is not about one more protocol or one more chiropractic adjustment. It's really about guiding women out of a state of systemic dependency and into a state of radical self trust and inner authority, back to trusting themselves, to seeing symptoms as signals instead of emergencies, seeing our emotions as our truest intelligence, and seeing both midlife and the early parenting years as a season of clarity for women that is so often downplayed.
Let's empower women all over the world. Dr. Marisa, can you share the moment of turning point when you realized you needed to begin your self healing journey?
That's a very good question. Truthfully, there is no one singular moment. What was very powerful for me, and it's so much of the work that I'm doing right now, was that perimenopausal menopausal state that women approach as they get closer to 50. And for me, there was a bit of a dark night of the soul at that point. There was a definite grieving process for me that I took about a year to really do some deep work into what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a woman both when she is, in her conception phase and when she no longer is? Who was I if I was no longer in that fertile phase? I was no longer, it's very interesting looking at the archetypes that are ascribed to women. Women are seen either as the maiden, the mother, or the crone. And so I'm still a mother, but I'm
Hmm.
very definitely not a crone. A crone is this, the image even of the crone is one that feels like it skips about 20 years of a woman's life from about 50 to 70, when women are incredibly powerful because of all of the experiences that we've had up to that point in our lives. Um, women at this age used to be the matriarchs of their society. They used to be the healers of our society. And if you look at the way that women at midlife are now portrayed in media and in movies and in television, it's very, very disempowering. One of the things that really struck me was the number of my patients over the years who would, reach about 45 and start having symptoms of perimenopause, for example. And their medical doctors would say things to them like, you don't need your uterus anymore, so let's just take it out. As though a healthy organ is something that should just be removed from the body. And most people, I find, don't have any real understanding of the function of the human body and the connection of the human body to our mind, to our spirit, to our soul. And so it's very easy to just say, well, I guess if my medical doctor told me I need to do this, then I need to do this. And everything that I saw in my journey as a holistic doctor was so disempowering of that lived experience of men and women. But my passion was always women's health. So that really brought me to where I am right now.
Dr. Marissa, how did your early experience shape your understanding of pain, growth, and healing?
I grew up very conventionally, like so many people do. My family really relied on Western medicine. I did not grow up in a holistic household. I didn't grow up with holistic food or that mindset. For me, it was something that I came to after my first university degree. I had always planned on being a medical doctor, a pediatric orthopedic surgeon, a pediatric oncologist. And all of a sudden, there was just this complete flip where I knew that I did not want to be dispensing drugs and surgery for the rest of my life. So it's very funny. There was no early experience in that way. Um, I think sometimes we just come across people in our lives who help to really blow open the constraints of our mind and our heart. For me, that one of those periods of time was when I was in chiropractic school and I was receiving care from a senior student. And she was doing some craniosacral work with me, is what she was doing, and just had her hands on my head. And all of a sudden, it was like my inner vision literally blew open. And from that point on, when I was working with people, it was no longer coming from here, it was coming from my heart. And I could feel in my body what was going on in theirs. And it was the start of my understanding that I think we all have far more capacity as human beings to connect with each other, to feel each other, than we realize. We really think that life is very physical. And I think we all have this incredible capacity to be extremely intuitive. You see it with children, especially with young children. They will look at something and they are seeing something, describe something that's not there. And we like to say that it's their imaginary friend or it's just their imagination. But I think that they are just so much closer to source that they really do have a very different vision of what is in front of them than we do. And we shut that down over years of, you know, enculturation into believing that life is very two-dimensional. But I think we also have this incredible ability to really feel more and sense more and intuit far more than we understand. And when we do that, the entire world opens up for us. Our health does, the world does, our life does, and we begin to really be much more connected to each other and to the earth that we stand on.
Challenges along the way, Dr. Marisa. What are the biggest obstacles you face in your self healing journey?
I think they would probably be a lot of what many people experience. We have to really be willing to get past our own self doubt, our own negative self speak, those experiences in our lives where we were made to feel less than, and really start to lean into trust and love, to be honest. That's not something that I think most people are taught. You know, we teach children to be loving and to love each other, but I don't think we really teach our children to be coming from their hearts first. I don't think, unless you're raised in certain cultures or certain religions, we don't teach our children to use the power of their breath in order to help them through difficult periods of time or stress or anxiety. We're living in a society that wants to medicate everything, that wants to pathologize and diagnose and medicate absolutely everything. And truthfully, I suppose one of my biggest stumbling blocks was refusing to do that and knowing that I was kind of out on the fringe to some extent, um, in the way that I practiced, in my mindset, in the way that I parented, in all of those things. And you have to be very clear about your own purpose, your own inner compass, really understanding who you are and what you have to offer the world if you're going to be standing somewhere out here on the fringe to some extent. Because it's always easiest just to go along to get along, to comply, to agree. And it takes a little more work to be willing to stand out on your own and say, I don't believe that's the way it works. I don't believe that's what healing truly looks like. I don't believe that's what we need to be doing. And I am choosing to create the world that I want to live in. Interestingly, over the past 5 years, with the world in total upheaval for so many reasons, I think more and more people are starting to recognize that just going along to get along is not really going to be conducive to their health and well-being and joy in life. And so I think we have this really unique opportunity in front of us right now to question everything deeply. And I mean, question everything in order to arrive at what feels most aligned for us with our truest North Star, what we truly know about ourselves. And getting to that point, like I said, takes some work. It takes that deep dive into who I am and what my experiences have been, and letting go of any trauma that somebody might have experienced, being willing to work through things, not being attached to a diagnosis or an experience, in order to come out the other side vibrant and healthy and full of light and love.
Dr. Marisa, tell us your podcast that will become soon.
So, my podcast that I'm working on right now is called Whole Health Alchemy. And much of the work that I'm doing right now is really looking at two main times of a woman's life. One of them is women's health at midlife, and not from a symptomatic perspective of, your hormones are doing this, so let's give you this. It's not that that's not valuable, it is, but there is so much more to truly stepping into our power at midlife than just what our hormones are doing. So that's a big part of what I'm working on right now. And the other part is where my other passion absolutely lies, which has always been raising healthy kids naturally, somewhat outside of the system. Because there is so much belief that unless we, again, do exactly as we're told, we're putting our children at risk. And the reality is that parents and mothers know their children better than anybody else does, and need to learn and relearn how to listen to that inner knowing, um, how to follow your own inner guidance as the primary, and then outside voices, the noise, external authorities as the backup. So that's what a lot of the podcast will be focused on.
Good luck to your podcast, Dr. Marisa, and looking forward for more success.
Thank you.
And yes, and can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Oh, huh. There are so many. Let's see. Right now, I'm reading poetry. I'm reading some Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass. I really appreciate Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, even though it is something like 19 centuries old. There is so much wisdom in that.
Yes.
Um, what else has been really powerful for me recently? I like to go back to a lot of poetry. My first degree was actually in English literature, and so I'll go back to things like Walden would be one. There's so much. I can't even think of one right now.
Yes, and thank you for that recommended books, Dr. Marisa. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there want to be like you?
Well, I suppose my piece of advice would actually be for people to be like them, like themselves. That
Yes.
that true cultural transformation will come when men and women, but again, my focus is on women, begin to reclaim their inner authority, the confidence that they know who they are, what's best for themselves, what's best for their children, in order to step into a state of radical self trust. There isn't a three-step quick fix, and that's part of the problem. We live in a society that wants convenience and everything fast. But I think with awareness and reframing where we are and where we're going, and practicing over and over and over again these simple embodied actions that rebuild trust in ourselves, um, we practice sovereignty in small everyday ways until it becomes second nature. And that's where self-healing and authority really take root.
Well, thank you for that advice, Dr. Marisa. Thank you. And how can people balance patience with the desire to see fast results?
Hmm. Well, I keep saying we don't want to go back to the times of Little House on the Prairie. And yet at the same time, I think that we have given up so much in the name of speed and convenience that there is a bit of a necessity to go back to simpler times. And interestingly, again, over the past 5 years, with all of the craziness in the world, that's one thing that we're seeing a lot of. We're seeing people moving out of cities to rural areas, buying land, baking bread, growing gardens, really getting their hands back in the earth, connecting with their breath, connecting with their internal selves. So there's something to be said for a return to simpler times and letting go of the hamster wheel that we're stuck on, um, because it's just not conducive to human health and well-being. It's not, and that's difficult in an age of such technocracy, such technological speed. But I would argue that human beings aren't made to be moving at that speed. I would argue that children, especially, are not made to be moving at that speed. And if we can become more intentional, a little bit slower, if we start to ask for deeper meaning and less convenience, then it's going to enrich our lives and our health in ways beyond our contemplation.
Very well said, Miss Marisa. Truly, truly empowering indeed. Why daily rituals or small habits can anyone adopt to support emotional and mental healing?
You're asking why daily habits?
Yes. or
Well, I
daily
mean, the reason,
rituals?
okay, so the reason really is that trying to take a massive leap forward is generally going to lead to frustration, potentially resentment, and a feeling that this just doesn't work. We're so conditioned to behave in a certain way right now that we need to be patient and kind to ourselves as though we were a young child just learning to walk again. Because really, that's what we're doing. And so that takes small steps. And it's almost a little bit of 5 step forward, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back as we learn to walk again in a very intentional, wholesome, earth focused, aligned way. If we jump into that and decide that we're going to do it all at once, it will most likely not end up going very well. And the human tendency then is to throw your hands up in frustration, swear a whole lot, and yell, "This just doesn't work." So, if we give ourselves the opportunity to move a little more slowly, a little more intentionally, not be looking for the quickest results, not be looking for convenience, but look instead for depth and meaning and heart centered and earth connected, while it might take us longer to achieve what it is that we want to achieve, the chances of it sticking and being successful in the long run is far greater than if we try to force something. We want to let go of the sense of forcing something to happen and open up an invitation for this relationship to develop between ourselves and the world in a different way.
Dr. Marisa, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please to listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast, Law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Dr. Marisa, if you could share one powerful truth you've discovered about self healing, what would it be?
For me, it's the concept that you are your own best medicine. And it's an interesting one because when I've discussed it with other podcast hosts, there's an assumption that when I say that people think I'm suggesting that we don't need the medical system or external advice at all. And that's not at all what it means. You are your own best medicine is this understanding that you are the ultimate authority on your own well-being. You know your body's history, your body's signals, you know your children's true needs better than any external expert. And when you trust this internal wisdom and you do the deep work to address root causes rather than just managing symptoms, you really become your own most powerful healer. That does not mean that if you need medication, if you have diabetes, if whatever else, that you do not follow medical advice. That's not what it means. It just means it speaks to two fundamental truths: that you are your greatest expert and you are your most powerful healer when you're willing to be courageous and do the deep inner work to unravel trauma and address toxic exposure and really reconnect with your body's wisdom.
Reconnected indeed. Dr. Marisa Heisel, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your upcoming podcast, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Of course. So, for right now, the best way to do that is to go to my website and subscribe to my email. And the website is elementalhealingarts.life. There are a number of things that are rolling out very, very shortly. But right now, if you subscribe, you can download something called the Energy Elevation Blueprint to really help with lifting your vibrancy and vitality in the world.
Yes, people, let's support Dr. Marissa Hazel because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Dr. Marissa, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I appreciate it.
More to come, people. See you soon.